So today is lesson 4 of Web Project Studio. We fixed the Blackboard shell thanks to the super funky, incredibly artistically creative Style Squad name, who shall henceforth be known without angled brackets. Let's go ahead and have a look at what we're doing today. Now that I've recreated. So lesson may be a bit short today. I know you guys had an assignment to do. So we're going to go over assignment 2 in a minute. It's due in 2 weeks, okay? And then basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about project specifications, and we'll do kind of a sample, just like we did a budget together as a class. We're going to do kind of use FreeCamp to lay out a set of specifications for a sample project, and that's pretty closely going to replicate what you have to do for assignment 2. So we'll do a kind of a sample project together in class with FreeCamp, and then assignment 2 will basically be your team doing a same version of this activity, but for the Man Up project. So I'm going to go over assignment 2 right now. It is now posted on Blackboard. It'll be due in 2 weeks. Again, just one submission per your team, and you just have to submit by Monday morning at 9 a.m. So not due Sunday at 5. So I will just update this here. So you're going to prepare and organize all the project tasks. So you're going to break down all the things you guys need to do to get this project done by the end of our semester, as well as some documentation around the site structure for the Man Up project. So here's what you have to do. You're going to use your FreeCamp board to list all of the tasks you need and divide those tasks into separate lists. Now it's up to you how you want to organize those lists, but I'm going to suggest maybe having 5 lists and dividing your tasks this way. So your design tasks, your tasks for your first presentation, your tasks for your first working version of the site, tasks for the final version, and then tasks for the final presentation. So it's up to your team how you will organize the tasks, but those would be my suggestions. And then inside of the list, you're going to list all of the individual tasks that you need to do. So they need to be identified, listed, and they should also be prioritized. You can have a lot of tasks when we break things down, and FreeCamp gives you the ability to rank them in terms of priority. So you're making sure you're taking care of the most important items first. So you don't have to submit anything for the tasks. I'm just going to review your tasks and lists on FreeCamp. You do need to submit 2 documents on Blackboard. One of them is a PDF that includes some site structure information. So that you should have a couple of wireframes. These don't have to be full mock-ups. That's going to be assignment 3, but at least the structure. So you should have at least 2 wireframes in your PDF, at least 1 desktop view and 1 mobile view. You need to have a site architecture, so like a site map where you've planned out all of the pages and sections of the site and how they link together. And I'll show you a couple examples. And you should also identify in here what technologies are you using. So are you using the mean stack? Are you using LAMP stack, PHP, MySQL? Are you using ASP.NET and SQL Server? That should be listed in this document. We typically give this document to our client and go over it with them and get some feedback. And again, you'll need a separate member contributions document. So just another copy of the same document you submitted for assignment 1, where again, you're honestly agreeing how much of the share of the work that each member of your team do. So here's the mark. So a few marks for the creating a professional document. The biggest part of the grade is for organizing your tasks on FreeCamp. A couple marks for identifying the technologies you're using. A few marks for the wireframes and for your site map. And I can show you a couple examples of some good assignment 2 submissions from previous years. Although I've changed the requirements, previous groups have had to put a lot more stuff in the document. And I think it's going to be more efficient if we just put all your the task part of the assignment on FreeCamp. So what does this look like? Let's have a look. Here's one from a few years ago. So very kind of polished looking document. Yes, they had their angled brackets in their team name. So let's see what's in here. Some of these things I'm not requiring. I had them list all the pages in the site. I'm not going to require you to do that. So here they identified the technologies they were using, and they kind of explained why they chose this. So you'll need a section like this in your document. Here are their wireframes. Again, it's not a full design mockup, so you don't have to concern yourself with things like colors and fonts at this point, but at least the layout, what are the components, and where are the different elements going to be placed in the layout. So they did a bunch of wireframes. They didn't have to do this many, but they did a great job. So sitemap. So what are the different pages and how do they kind of relate together? Okay, so that's sort of the document, the PDF part of it. I can show you one other example. So I'm not requiring this. They actually added a timeline, which was nice. Pick their technology stack, their site architecture with some, they actually added a description of the architecture and then had a couple slides of wireframes. Now I've posted on Blackboard in the lesson 4 folder. There's some tools here you could use. I've suggested a few tools for drawing sitemaps. Actually, I'll add one more. You can use any tool you like. So draw.io is another one. So there's 4 suggestions here of tools you could use for doing a site architecture diagram. And there's a whole bunch of tools that you might use, or you might use others for wireframing. Up to you, use any tool that you like. So I'm going to show you what the FreeCamp part should look like. Yep, I think I've got Adobe on here. Yeah, thanks, Justin. I do have it on the list. So I'll pull up a previous project. So what does this look like? Let's see. This one was pretty good, I think. Okay, so they had a task list for assignment 1. You guys don't need this because you already finished assignment 1. So they created tasks for assignment 2. So for their design presentation, again, they use the Kanban style of the to-do, doing, and done. So they created individual tasks. They could assign them to individual people, assign due dates. They could add subtasks in here. And then for their first release, so you can see they've managed to complete most of their tasks. And we'll kind of do an example of this together. So the idea behind the assignment is in 2 weeks, when you submit this, you will have broken down and prioritized all of the individual things that your team will need to do over the next 2.5 months to finish the project. So we plan it out. we divide it, we figure out what do we need to do, who's doing what, and in what order, and what are the priorities, and when are things due. We want to have all that organization and planning done before really we start doing the design and code work. And that way we have a good plan to work from. And we'll, like I said, we'll use FreeCamp collaboratively today in class to do a sample project. Are there any questions about assignment 2? I'll leave the document open. So if questions, not seeing any questions in the chat, but if anything comes to mind during the class, then you can of course ask. So I just need to update the document here on Blackboard. Bear with me for just a second while I do that. Okay, I just changed a bit of the text at the top, and the due date should be set for 2 weeks from now. Yeah, it is. Good. Okay. So this is kind of using FreeCamp as a bit of a more modern way to write specifications. I love this story almost as much as I love the story that Ivan shared with us. Take a second. This is truer than you know. So for many projects, this is actually the hardest part of the job. Once we get more experience as designers and coders, often building the applications itself is not the difficult part. The difficult part is actually figuring out, envisioning what is the end product supposed to look like, what are all the features it's supposed to have, and how is it supposed to work. And sometimes our clients have really clear visions of what they want, and they can articulate those visions to us. And in many other cases, either one of those things or none of those things is true. Either a client has a really clear vision, but they can't articulate it, or they don't even really know what they want. They only have kind of a vague picture of what they want and need, and they're really entrusting it up to us to help them kind of flesh out that vision. So this is critical, because if we don't kind of plan and design properly, we kind of need a target as to where are we going with this. You would never go and build, you wouldn't build a new house without a set of drawings. I think we talked about this a little bit in a previous lesson. The drawings really define in great detail, what's going to get built. What is your house going to look like? Exactly how big every room is going to be. Where's every doorway? Like, those things are planned in great detail. So planning an application, yeah, we should account for the fact we're probably going to need to be flexible, but we do really need to think about, we're not going to be successful if we just sit down with a vague idea and start building something. So there's kind of a couple ways we could do this. And actually, let me just pull this up. You Did you take project management last semester? Was that a required course for you? Yes. Okay. With Jira, and who is the instructor for project management? Okay. Thank you. And did you guys talk? Did you talk at all about different project management methodologies? I know, a super sexy topic. Did you talk about the waterfall process and the agile process at all? Okay. You talked about agile and sprints. Did you talk about the waterfall? Have you heard of the waterfall process as well, or you only talked about agile? Okay, so you talked about both. So how would you describe them? What's kind of the difference between them? You can use your microphone if that's easier. What do you remember about agile and waterfall? If this was a job interview and I asked you, what's the difference between the waterfall approach to doing a project and an agile approach? What could you say? Sounds like maybe a quick review is in order. Okay, Maggie, that's the biggest thing, right? Waterfall is basically a linear process. We plan and we don't change it very much, whereas agile, we expect to have changes, right? So I won't go over all this. This is posted on Blackboard. So waterfall sequential, we kind of do this one after the other. Yep. And a sprint was, yeah, like a small phase of an agile project. So waterfall looks something like this. You got it, Maria. Right. So in waterfall, we sit down with our client, we get the requirements, we design it and plan it, and then they leave us alone. We build it, we test it, and they don't see it kind of until later. Whereas in agile, we build a piece of it, we show them, we get feedback. So it's more of an iterative. So the waterfall lets us be really organized. It also helps us maintain our costs. It helps limit scope creep, and it's easy for us to track. But it's also very rigid, and it doesn't often, we spend a lot of time documenting things, and it doesn't respond well to changes. And one of the reasons that waterfall kind of has lost favor is we've learned most software projects change. So agile is designed to expect that change. So it's incremental, like Maria said. We build it in small pieces. We use interim milestones, so those are our sprints. We expect changes. So usually every week, every couple of weeks, we sit down with our customer. We show them, okay, we built this. Give us feedback. Do we need to change it? So we have to spend a lot of time collaborating and having client meetings. So agile is this kind of iterative process. Now, this isn't a project management class, so what we're going to do in this class, it's sort of agile-ish. We're sort of doing a bit of a hybrid between these two approaches, because our requirements really aren't going to change a lot. I'm not going to let Quentin come back here in March and ask you to build something totally different. It's kind of got to stick with the original game plan, but we still want to build this in pieces and have these regular kind of sprints or team check-ins. Okay. So we get these testable modules early, and it reduces some of our time. But we need lots of meetings. It also makes it harder to fix the price and timelines if we're going to allow the requirements to change. Yeah, so there's another way of comparing them visually. but we still have to do kind of the designing and the scoping. This is a bit old, but here are some of the success rates that Agile projects seem to be more successful, largely because they can accommodate some of this flexibility. Okay, so I'll show you an example of a specification document from a waterfall approach. Actually, let me go back here. Here, this is an old, when I was strictly using the waterfall approach, this was a specification document that we did for a client project. I think this document is from, I think we quoted on this sometime in 2009. You can see the number of pages here. This is a 40-page spec document where we list in great detail every single thing on the site, every page, every input field, what's required, what's optional. There's a former great student that worked for me that did a lot of this. She created in Microsoft Access a mock-up of every screen, every report, and this is a fairly complex application. And you can see how many versions of this we went through. We created 8 versions of this document before the client signed off on it, which is sort of crazy. But it meant by the time we went to write the code, all the decision making was already done. We already knew everything that we had to do in great detail. We didn't have to keep going back to the client. But we did have to come up with 9 versions of this document until he finally signed off on it. So it was good in that it gave us a super clear picture of what we had to build. Wasn't great in that it didn't really allow for flexibility. You know, once we'd spent all this time documenting this stuff and he signed off, we were sort of locked into it. So this is the old way. I used to actually have students for this assignment create a smaller version of this. This has kind of been replaced by this instead. Rather than documenting it there, we're going to use FreeCamp because it's much easier to make changes here. And it's just a lot more flexible. Rather than creating a static document, if we do it here, we can move things around and track progress at the same time, which will make our lives a lot easier. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to basically do a version of assignment 2 together on one of the sample projects we've already looked at. So in your week 4 folder, there's a link here that says FreeCamp sample project. So I believe I invited everybody over the weekend to the project. If you got an invitation from FreeCamp to this sample project, that was me. So if you open this up, we've got a blank slate here. So together, I'm going to give you a project definition. We want to break this down into individual tasks and then organize them into lists and prioritize them. So the project we can use for this is our realtor site that we did a budget for. So we've done the budget. So this was our list of requirements that we would have gotten from our client, the realtor. Maybe put it in the chat so you have access to it. So these are all of the features the website needs. So what we want to do is I want to start to identify all of the individual tasks that we need to do, and then we can organize them, break them down into lists, and kind of prioritize them. So let's do this. We'll do this as just a kind of a shared class exercise. So you can use your mic, you can use the chat. Let's break this down. If we were going to do all these things, what are all of the individual tasks we would need? So my suggestion is we should just list the tasks first, then we can organize them into lists and prioritize them. So what's one thing we would need to do, one individual task we would need to do in order to build this website? You can put it in the chat or just shout it out on the mic. We need to do this. And either I can add them to the FreeCamp board, you're also free, you can create tasks in the board yourself as well. So I'm going to create the first one here. So one thing we're going to need to do is go ahead and actually create a database. So you can, this board is shared, you should all have permissions to the board. So you can just add a task here, or you can put it in the chat or use your mic and I can add it. So seeing this list of features, what other tasks would we need to build this website? Okay, sure, that's a good one. Yep, so let's add that. Determine. So you can also add your own tasks and maybe just put your name in here. You can add the task yourself or you can put it in the chat and I'll add it, but give yourself credit for adding the task. Do you have the ability? You should be able to just add a task right here on the board. I think you should have permissions. Okay, so we need, Nick, when you say the front end web page, can you clarify for a minute? Was that a specific page? Okay, so Maggie, you need to, sorry, go ahead, Nick. Got it, okay. Okay, so here, I'll assign that one to Maggie. You can assign yourself. So maybe I'll assign this one to Ivan because it was his suggestion. Okay. Right, we need Rachel, yeah, we need to figure out the site architecture. So how are they going to link together? We're going to need to publish it. Okay, Ginelle, that one we've already done. So determining the features, that's here. Okay, so this list I put in the chat that we budgeted, so that we've already done. But then how do we need to break down these features into the individual tasks. So some of these features might be one task, some of them might have multiple tasks. So let's add all the individual tasks. So anything you see from that feature list, so I'll assign this one to me, because it was my suggestion. So what else will we need to do to get this site built? Right, okay. So wireframes and mockups. Okay, yep, that's right, Nick. We're going to need to add user accounts. So everybody in the class should have at least one task on here that you've created. So go ahead, use the add task button. Think of something we need to do here, create the task and assign it to yourself. Or you can also add it to the chat and I can add you, but I'd like to see everybody contribute something to our task list. Okay, yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to do CSS. Good idea, Emily. Of course, we're going to need to do that. So think about it this way. Imagine that you are the project manager. You're not going to do any of the work, but you have to assign the work for your design and development team. But they don't know what to do. You need to list out all of the tasks and assign them. So this is what we're doing. We're kind of serving in that project management role right now. So we're delegating. Okay. So Nick, yes, that's true. We may even want to be more specific, right? Because we're going to need to do CRUD of different types, right? So maybe we even want to break that down into being specific. Ah, Maggie, that's a good one, right? So we need to determine and configure roles and permissions, right? Who can do what? Aha, okay, yep. So feel free to go ahead and add those things as tasks. Okay, so yeah, Josie, we've got to set up the image galleries. That's a good one, right? Because that's one of the things when we're looking at a house, we need to be able to see a gallery of all the images. Okay, so that's a good one, Nick. Yeah, we need the listings management that we can add, edit, and delete listings. Yep. Right? Someone on the project's got to be responsible to make sure that gets built. Right, Emily said testing. Quality assurance. Yep. Okay, yeah, so Young, right, if we're going to have the map, that's a task we're going to have to assign to somebody. Okay, it's a good list so far. Anything else you can see here? What other things have we? Right. So Ginelle, why don't you add that one to the online appointment, the management system? And Maggie, yep, you can add the branding. Now the branding that may come in right. So Maria's right. We've got to build the virtual tour. So the branding may come in here. I think kind of same thing, research and brainstorm the site design. But Maggie, that may be something else. Yeah, Nick, in this case, it's not part of their requirement. There's nothing to buy. Yeah, Ivan, the navigation structure. Okay, Janelle, you can't log in. That's odd, but okay, I can add. Janelle, I'll add what you mentioned. So you mentioned the appointment booking system. Yep. Um, right. So yes. So Ivan, Rebecca, Camilo, great suggestions. Can you each add those tasks? Camilo, absolutely. We need a change password and forget password feature. We need the mortgage calculator. Um, and yes, Ivan, we need the navigation, right? Somebody's got to actually build the control of the navigation bar. So let's go ahead and add those tasks. So just use the add task button and add all those things. Or I can add them quickly, no big deal. So we've got update, forget password. Okay, that's great. Ivan, thank you. Okay, yeah, we can use the mortgage calculator as well. Okay, so let's go back and look now. I see one more section. So we've addressed a lot of the functionality here. There's still one section of functionality we haven't touched that we're going to need to implement. Rudy, Janelle mentioned that the visit request was the online booking, I think. Yeah, the news, right? So they want a sidebar in the layout that features news, and then they need to be able to click any news item and read the full thing. So the realtors are always posting things, information about the real estate market. If they have an open house at one of their listings, they're going to post that as an event. So we need those as well. Right, so we're going to have news sidebar. So that's probably one task. Or we can even create this, and we can use subtasks as well, where tasks are kind of grouped together. So we'll say news. And then under FreeCamp, it actually allows us to create subtasks. Now, we just have to. So news. So we've got news sidebar, and also the news detail. So we get maybe a short description and a title and a date on the sidebar. Then we click it, we get a full. And then we also have a full all news page. So our sidebar might show the most current news, but then typically we're going to have a page where users could go and see everything. Right? So we can group them together. So news has got 3 subtasks. So again, we could divide and prioritize those subtasks. And Justin, I know you added something else here. Okay, so yeah, Justin, you mentioned it. So we've got it repeated twice. You know what, Maggie, you've got one already there, so maybe I'll assign this one to Justin. Okay. So I can actually move the subtask under here. Okay. So I think we've taken care of the features. Are there any other tasks you can think of? Any other work we're going to need to do on this project you can think of? We're going to build the database, create a homepage, figure out the technology stack, publish to the web server, do the site architecture, figure the required pages, do a mock-up, brainstorm our branding and design, create the accounts, determine our outside links, do the CSS, build the image galleries, configure different roles, manage the property listings. Yep, the hosting would be in the web server. Yep. The video tour component, testing and quality assurance, our Google Map, booking appointment to view a listing, figuring out and creating our navigation, our mortgage calculator, password reset, news module with sidebar detail and news page. There are a few other hosting related tasks. So I may be going to do this. So publishing is one. So under hosting, so maybe Emily, you mentioned this, so we'll give it to you. What other things would we have to do? Let's see, Nick, I'm going to drag your launch down because that's kind of related to the hosting. So I'll put these together. What other things do we have to do in terms of hosting? I mean, we have to publish it. We've got to find a web host and publish it. There's a couple other things we need to do. I can think of at least 3 things we need to do before we could launch the website to the live server. Yes, we would need to do a database connection. Okay, so yeah, let's see. If we're working with a local database, sure, that's true, Justin. Okay, so publish DB to server. Aha, Emily, right. We need to set up an SSL certificate. Yeah, now we're probably, Nick, pushing to GitHub all the way along because we should be backing up our code to GitHub. Right, Justin, we need a domain name. So buy or set up the domain name. What about tasks in terms of SEO? Probably some things we should be setting up. Right. Actually, I'm going to create that as its own task with its own subtask list. So SEO. So Nick, you mentioned that one. And So let's create that at the bottom. Let's think about our SEO subtasks. Right, so here we're going to have Emily, you're right. Can you be a bit more specific when you say in the HTML? What should we be doing in the HTML regarding our SEO? Yep, I'm going to create meta tags. Now possibly yes, if our client wants to add, right? So title tag. So we want title tags. Schema. So now, yeah, we'll put in ads if the client wants, right? Right? They may not want to advertise, but they may. Yeah, I think social media is in there. Yep, Camilo, right. So you know what? I'll sure, yeah, because that's a good idea, Camilo. It is the keywords. I'm going to leave social media out, Nick, just because I think somebody already added social media. So we do have it, I think, already in the list. Right? So there's a lot of stuff we need to do here. Like just to say we got to do SEO, well, that's not very helpful. Right? This is a more helpful list now where we have this specific tasks and we know exactly what we need to do. If we were delegating this work to somebody else, they would know precisely what things we needed. Okay, this is a good list. The idea of creating these tasks and task lists is, again, we could give this task to someone else and they should know exactly what it is they have to do. Nick, it's so right. It sounds easy, it sounds basic, but this is the phase of the project where we have to take these high-level requirements and think about, okay, what does this really mean? This is the output, right? This is the outcome, but what is the work involved in order to do this? So this is where our individual tasks become useful. And in terms of something that sounds easy, we also have this conversation with customers. So for example, a customer asks you, let's say we have an input form, we have a registration form. And let's say there's maybe 10 inputs on that form. And we build it all, we get it all up and running, and then our client takes a look at the form and says, actually, there's one more field I want to ask users for when they register. How many things do we need to do to add that one input, right? The customer thinks this is going to take 5 minutes, right? You just add another label and input on the form. How long would it actually take you to add one input field to a form in a website that was actually like already live and published? Think about all the tasks you would need to do. Right, so add one input field to a published form. What are all the tasks you'd need to do to make that functional? Right, you need to update the database, update HTML, maybe CSS. What else would you have to update? So you could add a field in the database. You could add the new label and input onto the form. What else would you have to change? Right, we'd have to add that to the code. You'd have to update the processing logic, right? So now we have a new field that would have to go in our insert. You'd have to test it. If you were saving a new field, it means whatever page we're showing the registrations to in our customer, we're probably going to have to add it for output. Because why would we save a new field to the database if nobody could see it? Add new field to output page. And where would you do all this work first? Would you do this in the live site first? Or would you do it somewhere else? Right, Justin, that's a good question. Right. We'd have to think about the existing records. Does that matter? So where would you do all this work? Your website's already live. People are using it. Right. So you're going to have to do all of this locally, test it, right? Or on a staging server. We'll talk about that another day. Probably both. And then you're going to have to make all these changes again on the live server and test them again. So how much time would you charge your customer? Again, we're charging them $25 an hour. How much would you bill them when they say, I want you to add one more input box to this form? What's reasonable? How many hours would you need to do this? You do all this work twice. 8 to 10 hours for one input? Okay, any other opinions? 3? 8? For me, I would probably charge probably 2 hours, right? And then a customer is going to say, I'm going to tell them, quote them, it's going to be 2 hours at this rate. And the customer is going to say, really, it's going to cost me that much for you to add one box? But the thing is, this is all they see. They see this one box and they might see this that you've outputted. They don't see any of these other things, all of the structure and all the work that has to happen in behind, and that you have to do the work twice or even 3 times. Once on your development environment, maybe on a staging environment, and then test it all again live. So I'm pointing this out to come back to Nick's point about it seems easy, these things seem basic, but when you actually break down all the work involved, typically this helps us realize things are a lot more work than they might seem just from looking at the end product, because so much of what we do is not visible to people. So doing this sort of really detailed breakdown really helps us. It helps us quote accurately, but it also helps us manage the work in the project. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. So here's what I would like to do. Let's take a 10-minute break. I'm going to stop the recording and go stretch our legs. So we've done, I think, the initial work of laying out the tasks. When we come back, what I want to then do is we need to organize these. So we want to kind of categorize them into different phases of the project and prioritize them so we know in what order we would do these things. Okay, this won't take us, and that'll basically be it for today. Then we'll wrap up. So I would think probably by about 10:30 today, we should be done. Yeah, so Rudia, this is what I want you to do in your assignment, right? This is kind of a mini version of assignment 2. So in 2 weeks, when you're done assignment 2, you should have broken out the Man Up project into first all the specific tasks, and then you're going to organize them, which we're going to do in the next part of class, into lists. So what we're doing together, that's basically what you're doing for assignment 2, plus the wireframes and sitemap. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break here. We will come back at 10:12 by my clock.